Why there will never be a peace agreement between Ukraine and Russia? Is peace between Ukraine and Russia possible? The collective West seems blind to a fundamental contradiction. It condemns Russia's military attack on Ukraine as unjustified, while simultaneously trying to justify it. This contradiction exists because the justification of the war is seen as necessary for initiating peace negotiations, or, in other words, to bring both the perpetrator and the victim to the negotiating table. However, negotiations require a justification that portrays Russia not as a victim, but at least as a rational actor, perhaps a frightened and anxious entity. Thus, the West's narrative justifying Russia's military aggression began with claims about the violation of Russia's security interests. Russia allegedly feared a NATO attack from Ukraine's territory, not immediately, but perhaps in 5 to 10 years after Ukraine's numerous failed bids for NATO membership. In 5 to 10 years, the argument goes, the elites of Austria, Germany, the Netherlands, Italy, Greece, France, Spain, Hungary, and others, allegedly influenced by the Kremlin, would take power. These leaders would range from right-wing figures like Marine Le Pen to centrists like Olaf Scholz. Further, the narrative envisions an even greater military threat to Russia in 2030, stemming from Western-funded groups composed of LGBT activists, environmentalists, and pacifists. Once in power, these groups would, supposedly, launch an invasion of Russia from Ukrainian territory using tanks. Interestingly, despite this supposed existential threat, the West is currently unprepared to exploit the war in Ukraine to launch its own attack on Russia. This lack of readiness likely explains why U.S. President Joe Biden has emphasized preventing American troops from directly participating in the liberation of Ukrainian territories. It also appears to underpin restrictions on the Ukrainian armed forces using American weapons to target Russian territory. Later, the narrative shifted to cultural explanations, emphasizing the peculiarities of the Russian mentality and its troubled soul, which, it was argued, must be accommodated. French President Emmanuel Macron even suggested allowing Putin to save face. Finally, the justification ended with phantom pains over Russia's lost historical territories, some of which it has already occupied and others it aspires to reclaim. The only certainty in this scenario is that Ukraine remains independent, albeit with uncertain borders. The West must finally decide whether the war is justified or not. Most would agree it is unjustified, leaving no legitimate grounds for negotiation. Without such grounds, there is no basis for a peace deal. The reality is that the stronger side, Russia, takes as much as it can, and if possible, it will take more. Yet, the West continues to push Ukraine toward negotiations. This approach is akin to asking someone robbed of their car to negotiate with the thief under the condition that the thief keeps the car but spares the garage. Such an arrangement is not only humiliating, but also futile. Nevertheless, the West offers Ukraine such a peace deal, hoping that Russia will refrain from future aggression. Russia will cease its aggression only in one case, when its military is decisively defeated and the occupied Ukrainian territories are liberated. Even the defeat of the Russian army in occupied territories does not guarantee a peace agreement. If the Kremlin loses all captured lands, it will refuse to sign any agreement. Even losing only part of the occupied territories will not prompt Moscow to negotiate. The Kremlin seeks only one outcome: Ukraine's capitulation, whether immediate or delayed. Capitulation, however, is not synonymous with peace. The West remains trapped by its own flawed concepts, such as the belief that every war ends with a peace agreement, a notion that has failed repeatedly in history. As long as the West clings to this idea, the war will persist. The war can be frozen, but only if the Russian army is defeated in the occupied territories, with the front line established along Ukraine's state borders. Even then, no legal formalization would occur. Alternatively, the war can end, but only through the complete defeat of Russia's military and the occupation of Moscow. In that case, legal formalization would come in the form of capitulation, not a peace agreement. In short, this conflict will be resolved through military strength, not through diplomatic maneuvers or rhetorical balance.
Дякуємо за перегляд. Ще більше відео дивіться на нашому каналі.